heard the click of the front door just after 10 p.m. Later than Caitlin ever came home on a weeknight. I was still on the couch, half watching some rerun I'd seen too many times, but the moment I heard her heels on the hardwood, my attention shifted. She stepped into the house like she'd just been airlifted from some magazine photo shoot. The first thing I noticed was the dress. It wasn't something from her usual rotation. This one was different. Sleek black fabric that shimmered faintly in the light, hugging her in a way that wasn't just flattering. It was intentional. The kind of dress you wore for someone to notice. I'd seen her wear nice outfits before. Weddings, anniversaries, dinners with friends. But this wasn't for me. I knew that before my brain had even caught up. Then came the scent. Perfume. Expensive, heavy, lingering in the air a beat too long. Not the light floral notes she normally wore, the ones that faded an hour after she left the house. This was deeper, richer. Something you'd wear when you wanted the scent to stay on someone else's skin. Underneath it, there was the faint tang of wine. I caught it when she brushed past me toward the kitchen, the clink of keys and the rustle of a shopping bag in her hand. She set a small white dessert box on the counter with this casual smile, like she was making an offering. "I brought something for us. Thought we could share later," she said, her tone just breezy enough to sound rehearsed. But my eyes weren't on the box. They were on the side of her neck. It was quick, a flash when she turned her head to set down her purse, but I saw it, a faint smear of lipstick in a deep, plum shade. Caitlin didn't wear lipstick like that, ever. She had her signature tones, soft rose, muted coral, but nothing that bold. It wasn't hers. I stood there for a second too long, trying to piece it together. She caught me looking. Her hand went to her neck almost unconsciously, brushing her hair forward to cover the mark. "Oh," she said lightly. "That?" Someone at the restaurant leaned in for a hug and must have caught me with their lipstick. I didn't even notice until I was leaving. The words tumbled out too fast, too smooth. The kind of explanation that doesn't just appear in the moment, you prepare it. You rehearse it in the car, maybe even in the restroom mirror before you leave. "Uh-huh," I murmured, not moving from my spot. My tone must have been flatter than I intended because she quickly added, "It was nothing, just awkward. I'll grab some makeup remover in a bit." She picked up her phone from her purse and placed it face down on the table. Screen hidden, notification light out of view. I watched her thumb linger on the edge of the case before she let it go, almost like she was making sure I wouldn't catch a glimpse. The rest of her movements had that same rehearsed quality. Coat off, folded neatly over the back of a chair. Shoes slipped off with careful precision, as if she were conscious of me watching. She even asked about my evening, how work went, whether I'd eaten. Her voice laced with a kind of deliberate cheerfulness I hadn't heard from her in weeks. I answered in clipped sentences, and each one she responded to with this almost overcompensating warmth that, more than anything, put my stomach in knots. It was the kind of warmth you used to steer someone away from asking the wrong questions. And maybe it would have worked, if not for that mark on her neck. We sat at the kitchen island for a bit, her talking about the dinner with the team she'd had. She mentioned her boss, a couple of coworkers, even told me about some funny mix-up with the dessert order. I noticed her story was heavy on atmosphere, how nice the place was, how much everyone laughed, but light on specifics. No names besides her boss, no mention of where people were seated, no details about what she actually ate. I nodded along, but the whole time, I kept thinking about the lipstick, about how she'd brushed it off with such ease, about how she'd had that explanation ready before I even opened my mouth. The box of dessert sat between us like a prop. She pushed it toward me at one point, saying, "Go ahead, open it. They had extras, so I thought of you." I didn't touch it. Instead, I studied her. How her hands stayed folded neatly on the counter, how her phone stayed within arm's reach, how she glanced at it every time it buzzed but didn't pick it up. I noticed the faint sheen on her collarbone, like she'd reapplied lotion or perfume before coming inside. And when she smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes. When she finally excused herself to change, I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the dessert box. It was a nice touch, I had to admit. A way of saying, see, I thought of you, while keeping the focus off the rest of the night. I wasn't ready to say anything. Not yet. But as I listened to her footsteps upstairs, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened tonight, she'd been ready for me to ask about it. She'd walked in prepared, like a defendant with her alibi already memorized. And that was almost worse than the mark itself. That night I lay awake, the ceiling fan clicking like a metronome for my thoughts. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort but accuses. I stared at the dim halo of the streetlight sneaking through our blinds and replayed the last few months like I was scrubbing through a security tape, pausing on every frame that didn't sit right. Started small. Caitlin had always let her Maps app run because she liked the ETA badge on her lock screen. Then, suddenly, she was saving battery. Her GPS toggled off. When I teased her about getting lost, she laughed and said she had a great sense of direction. The laugh didn't reach her eyes. The battery life, meanwhile, somehow got worse. Then there were the deliveries. Slim, tasteful boxes from brands that didn't send coupons, the kind with embossed logos that whisper, "You can't afford me." She'd grab the packages before I could, slice them open with her thumbnail, and vanish down the hall. Later, I'd find price tags in the bathroom trash, twisted off and balled up, numbers that didn't belong in our budget. Lingerie tags with sizes I recognized but styles I never saw at home. Drawer space rearranged. A gap where her soft, well-worn pieces used to be, replaced by negative space and a whiff of cedar. On the kitchen calendar, our halfway decent attempt at adulting little symbols began to appear in Caitlin's neat block letters. Asterisks, triangles, and once, a small wave doodle next to meeting. When I asked, she said it was a new productivity system she'd heard about on a podcast. I made a joke about needing a legend. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said the legend would only confuse me. That was her way lately. Lightness over clarity. I tried to talk myself down. People change routines. Work gets busy. Maybe we're just in a drought and neither of us wants to say it. But then came the pivots. I'd ask a simple question, "How was dinner?" And she'd pivot into my day, my stress, my deadlines. It was like conversational judo. Use my weight against me until I toppled onto a new subject. Or she'd soften her voice and say, "Hey, are you sleeping okay?" As if concern were a smokescreen. It worked often enough that I began to feel superstitious about asking anything at all. She started staying late at the office, though the office group chat went quiet earlier than her "still here" texts. She began carrying 2 chargers and using neither at home. In photos coworkers posted, she was always just out of frame like a ghost that blurred the corner. A Saturday proved the turning point. She said she had a team workshop downtown and left in a blazer she hadn't worn since interviews. 2 hours later, I got a notification that our shared card had been tapped at a boutique on King Street. I searched the brand. The homepage loaded a model leaning on a marble sink, a price tag in the corner that made my eyebrows climb. I shut the tab like it burned. When she came home that evening, she had a paper cup of herbal tea and the tea bag label still dangling like proof of innocence. "Long day," she said. She stretched, the blazer creasing, and asked if I could rub her shoulders. I did, because that's what you do when you want to believe. My thumbs found tension under her skin, a rope pulled too tight. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Face down, always face down. And she ignored it with theatrical intent. A moment later she asked whether I'd thought more about repainting the guest room, as if a roller and a gallon of eggshell could cover whatever this was. Later, while taking out the trash, I noticed a crumpled boutique receipt poking from the bathroom bin. I didn't go digging. I told myself I didn't want to be that person. But I nudged the lid anyway. And there it was, totals that started with a 6 and ended with 2 zeros, and a line item named for a color I couldn't even picture. I took the bag to the curb like it weighed nothing and felt like it weighed a lot. Nights turned into an inventory, not of objects, of patterns. The new passwords, the suddenly sacred morning runs with no music playing, as if she needed to hear footsteps behind her. The showers that ran longer, steam billowing under the door like a fog machine. The dry cleaning slips she forgetfully left in her coat pocket, clipped to nothing I ever saw. And the perfume, always the perfume. Blooming in the hallway like a staged home you know you can't afford. One evening I tried something old-fashioned. Honesty. "You feel far away lately," I said while we were washing dishes. She handed me a plate and said, "I've just been tired." I asked what from: work, life, us. She said, "All of the above." And then, before the water even cooled, asked if I'd considered upgrading my resume, weirdly enthusiastic about a webinar she'd found for me. I dried the plate and wondered when concern became choreography. The calendar bothered me the most. Symbols multiplied. 2 dots, a slash, a circle filled in like an eclipse. I started keeping my own shadow calendar in my head. Tuesday dots meant she came home wired, like she'd guzzled espresso. Triangles meant silence and an early bedtime. Waves meant she stayed in the shower until the mirror got so opaque you could draw on it with your fingertip. I never found the legend, but the pattern learned me. She bought new luggage, lightweight, hard-shelled, small enough to slide under a desk. "It was on sale," she said. A week later she borrowed my raincoat and returned it smelling like a lobby I'd never visited. She laughed when I noticed. "They've got a new diffuser at work," she said. I nodded, filing it next to the calendar glyphs and the GPS that never spun. I caught myself doing small, petty experiments, and I hated it even as I did it. I plugged her phone in at 20% just to see if she'd yank the cord and say she needed to save battery. She did. I asked who was on her project now, and she answered with titles instead of names. I placed the calendar on the wrong week and waited to see if she'd fix it. She did right away, then kissed my forehead like I was a well-meaning child. One night, she came back late and set a tiny envelope on the counter. 2 glossy tickets to a gallery opening that had already happened. "Client had extras," she said, shrugging. "A souvenir without the event. Evidence without context." I wish I could say I confronted her, that I drew a bright line and said we don't do secrets here. But the truth is I stalled. I lived in the gray because the gray still contained the version of us I knew. If I stepped into black and white, something would have to end. The night that sealed it wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no screaming. She came home humming, shoes in hand, hair a little mussed like the wind had been kind. On the counter, she set down a small notebook I'd never seen. Linen cover, elastic band, tasteful. When she went to shower, I glanced. Not pages of writing, just dates with symbols and, in the corner of one page, a little heart next to a city abbreviation. CHS, Charleston. I shut the book fast, my pulse tripping. My mind tried to barter with me. Maybe it's a client site, maybe it's someone's bachelorette plans. But a heart is a heart, even if you draw it with a fine-point pen. When she emerged in her robe, she smelled like that same expensive ghost. She looked at me like she could tell I was somewhere else. "You okay?" she asked. I said I was tired. She nodded, walked past, and palmed her phone as delicately as a magician reclaiming a card. In bed, she rolled away, and I watched the dark outline of her shoulder rise and fall. I told myself to sleep. Instead, I mapped exit routes and rehearsed questions I'd probably never ask. The fan clicked on, off, on, off. In the half-light, I understood something I didn't want to. The distance between us wasn't an accident. It was maintenance. It took effort to keep this far apart. I lay there until the birds started up, and by then the decision had made me, even if I hadn't made it yet. The next morning would bring whatever it brought. But the night had given me something I couldn't unsee. A pattern so careful it had to be hiding something. And if you arrange your life like a code, you're telling someone you don't trust them to read the plain text. The next morning started like any other. Caitlin moving around the kitchen before work, the faint sound of her coffee grinder humming like background noise. She was humming too, some soft tune under her breath, like nothing in the world was off. I sat at the table with my laptop open, not really working, just watching her in the reflection of the dark screen. She moved in that smooth, deliberate way that had started to feel like choreography. Every action purposeful, polished, without a single step out of place. And then my email pinged. It was an automated subject line. Nothing suspicious at first. Booking confirmation, the Charleston Harbor Grand Hotel. I almost deleted it without opening, thinking it was spam or one of those phishing things that slip through filters. But then I saw the recipient. My email. The one Caitlin rarely used for anything. I clicked. The header was clean and elegant, gold font over white. Thank you for your reservation. My eyes skimmed the details, each line dropping like a stone in my stomach. Check-in date, next Friday. A 2-night stay in a luxury suite with ocean views. Champagne on arrival. Couple spa treatment scheduled for Saturday at 3 p.m. And then the line that stopped my breath. Registered guests. Caitlin Moore and Daniel Reeves. Daniel Reeves. Her boss. I stared at it so long the words started to blur. There was no wriggle room here, no creative interpretation. Her name, his name, a room built for two, and a weekend plotted out in advance. My cursor hovered over the forward button, instinct telling me to send it to a separate account immediately. I did. Then I saved a PDF copy. Then I saved it again to an external drive I hadn't touched in years. The attachments caught my eye. There were 3. The first 2 were itineraries from the hotel, dinner reservations, spa bookings. The third was a set of images. I clicked, and my breath left me in a sharp, quiet rush. They weren't surveillance photos. No, these were polished, professional sh*TS from some company event. Apparently a wedding the company had attended as part of a networking trip. The bride and groom weren't in every picture, but Caitlin and Daniel were. In one, they stood shoulder to shoulder in a group, casual enough. In another, they were holding hands. Not as a joke, not mid-laugh, but with fingers laced, bodies tilted toward each other in that unconscious way people do when the rest of the world has faded. The last photo wasn't subtle. They were leaning in toward one another, her smile soft and close-lipped, his gaze fixed entirely on her. It wasn't the look of colleagues. It wasn't even the look of friends. It was the look you save for someone you've already crossed a line with. I sat back, my chair creaking in the quiet. I wanted to feel the heat of anger, but instead, there was a strange cold clarity. For weeks I'd been living in the gray. Symbols on calendars, perfume that didn't belong, explanations rehearsed in the car. Now it was all colorless, stripped down to the truth. She wasn't just hiding something. She was planning something. Caitlin breezed in from the kitchen, coffee in hand, checking her phone before glancing up at me. Everything okay? You look pale. I shut my laptop halfway. Just an early email. Work stuff. She nodded like she believed me, but her gaze lingered a second longer than usual. Then she sipped her coffee, hummed that same soft tune, and moved toward the stairs. The moment she was out of sight, I reopened the laptop and scanned the confirmation again, memorizing every detail. There was no denying it now. Charleston wasn't a work trip. It wasn't a girl's weekend. It wasn't innocent. This was deliberate. My mind was already shifting gears. Confronting her now would be useless. She'd deny, twist, cry, anything to rewrite the script. No, if she'd spent weeks curating her cover story, I could spend a little time building mine. I copied the files onto 2 flash drives. One stayed in my desk, buried under tax forms. The other went straight into the locked glove compartment of my car. Then I opened a new document and started a timeline. Every date, every odd purchase, every unexplained absence. The lipstick mark, the boutique receipt, the coded calendar entries. And now Charleston with Daniel Reeves, booked and paid. It was strange how steady my hands were. When Caitlin came back down, dressed for work in a tailored navy suit, she paused to slip her phone into her purse. Always face down, always locked. Don't forget we have dinner with your sister next week, she said casually, like she was the kind of person who never forgot family events. I smiled. I won't. She kissed my cheek, just a brush, nothing lingering, and walked out the door with that same precise stride. I listened to her car back out, the garage door rumbling shut. The quiet after she left wasn't heavy this time. It was focused. I took the external drive from my desk and slipped it into my jacket pocket. On my way to work, I stopped at the bank, rented a safety deposit box, and slid the drive inside. The clerk didn't even glance at it, just closed the box and spun the lock. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't chasing shadows. I had the thing itself. Proof. Not suspicion. Not interpretation. And if she thought she could keep me wandering in her maze of half-truths until Charleston came and went, she was wrong. She'd built her story for an audience that wanted to believe her. I was done being that audience. I didn't go into work that day. I called in with some vague excuse about not feeling well, though the truth was the opposite. I'd never felt more awake. It was as if my brain had shifted into a different gear, the kind you don't find until you've been pushed into a corner with no way out. For weeks, I'd been living in reaction mode, watching her, second-guessing myself, trying to decode her. Now I was done reacting. The Charleston booking had stripped away the last layer of doubt, and with it, the impulse to play fair. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. I started writing, not a letter, not some emotional purge, but a plan. Step by step. I wrote down the obvious first. Secure all important documents. Gather financial records. Make copies of the Charleston booking and photographs. Decide when to leave and how. The pen moved fast, my handwriting tighter than usual. I thought of it less as preparation for a breakup and more as preparation for an operation. Because that's what this had to be, surgical. I'd seen what happened when people confronted a liar too soon. They flipped the script, painted themselves as the victim, turned anger into pity. And Caitlin, she'd mastered the art. If I charged in now, she'd give me tears, half-truths, maybe even promises to change. And the worst part? A part of me might still want to believe her. No, this had to end in a way that left no air in the room. I started with the documents. Birth certificate, passport, banking information, the deed to the house. Some of it was in the desk, some in the safe in our bedroom. I waited until I was sure she'd be buried in her afternoon meetings before I cracked it open. The safe smelled faintly of cedar and the perfume she liked. She must have stored things in there recently. I tried not to think about what. Next came cash. I'd never been a hoarder, but I knew enough to keep a little emergency stash hidden in a cigar box in the garage. I counted it 800 and change. Enough for gas, food, and a few nights anywhere I needed to be. By noon, I'd cleared my own essentials into a duffel bag I stashed in the trunk of my car. Not a dramatic, suitcase-by-the-door move, just quiet preparation. Then I turned to the digital trail. I copied the Charleston booking confirmation, the wedding photos, every scrap of correspondence I'd saved into a secure, encrypted folder. Then I duplicated the folder to 2 USB drives. One went into my desk drawer, buried under old instruction manuals. The other into my coat pocket. It was almost methodical enough to make me forget why I was doing it. Almost. But then I'd see her name beside his on that hotel booking, and the cold focus would return. In the middle of all this, my phone buzzed. A text from Caitlin, heading into a meeting. Don't forget dinner tonight. Mom's expecting us. Dinner with her mother. A perfectly normal event in a perfectly normal marriage. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I typed back, wouldn't miss it, and stared at the words before hitting send. This was the game. Normal on the surface, rot underneath. By late afternoon, the outline on my legal pad had evolved. It wasn't just about leaving, it was about timing. She'd spent weeks, maybe months, weaving a safety net. Friends, family, coworkers, all of them would have heard her version by the time she made her move. That was what I wanted to dismantle. The idea came to me quietly, as if it had been sitting in the back of my head waiting for the right moment. If she wanted to live in her version of events, I'd let her. Right up until the moment I pulled the floor out from under it. I wouldn't confront her before Charleston. I wouldn't even confront her after. I'd wait until she thought she was safe, until she'd filed away her trip as a secret successfully kept. And then, when she least expected it, I'd let the truth surface in a way she couldn't control. I thought about what that might look like. An anonymous package to someone who mattered, someone who could make her feel the weight of what she'd done. Maybe her family, maybe Daniel's wife if he had one, maybe both. I'd never been one for revenge, but this didn't feel like revenge. It felt like defense. Around 6, I pulled myself together for dinner with her mother. Caitlin arrived home right on time, as polished as if she'd just stepped off a magazine page. soft curls framing her face, a pale blue dress I'd never seen before. She kissed my cheek like we'd had the kind of day couples in commercials have. "Ready?" she asked, keys in hand. I smiled. Always. Dinner was exactly what I expected. Small talk about her mother's garden. A few updates on relatives I barely knew. The occasional gentle dig about when we were going to give her grandchildren. Caitlin played the attentive daughter, laughing at the right moments, filling her plate just enough to look like she had an appetite. I matched her energy, even took her hand under the table once. If she noticed the difference in my grip, steady, deliberate, she didn't show it. Back home, she kicked off her heels and sank into the couch with a glass of wine. I joined her, scrolling absently through my phone while she recounted some story about a client's anniversary party. The cadence of her voice was smooth, but I could hear the places where she skipped details. Always skipping details. That night, while she slept, I took the next step. I logged into our shared cloud storage, something she'd probably forgotten existed, and downloaded every photo from the past 6 months. Buried among sunsets and selfies were a few candid *TS I didn't remember taking. One in particular stopped me. Her reflection in a mirror at what looked like a hotel lobby, phone in hand, wearing a dress I'd never seen. Daniel's blurred form sat in the background, head bent toward her. I saved it. By 2 a.m. My plan had solid bones. I wouldn't storm out. I wouldn't let her corner me into an argument where she could rewrite history in real time. I'd disappear clean, leave her with a narrative she couldn't manipulate, and make sure the truth found its way to the right eyes without my name attached. And when that happened, it wouldn't be in the middle of an argument or during some teary confession. It would be on a day when she woke up thinking she'd gotten away with everything. That was the part that would matter. Not the leaving, the timing. I turned off the lamp, lay back in bed beside her, and stared at the ceiling. She shifted in her sleep, murmured something I couldn't catch, and draped an arm across me. Once, that weight might have felt like comfort. Now it felt like strategy. I kept my breathing steady, my mind already weeks ahead. When I finally drifted off, it wasn't to dreams of her or Daniel or Charleston. It was to the image of her face when the walls finally came down, and she realized I'd been building the exit all along.